All right, welcome to today's webinar on financial aid information. I just wanted to kind of introduce ourselves so you know who's speaking today. My name is Simona Beatty. I'm going to be your webinar moderator, and joining me is Tracy Reisinger. She's our Director of Financial Aid here at Marylhurst.
Welcome.
So we wanted to go over very quickly what we're going to discuss in this webinar today. So whether you're applying to Marylhurst University or any other university out there, these are general information about financial aid, some big areas that you should be asking prior to applying for financial aid and things that you should be considering. So just briefly, obviously what aid is available, eligibility, how to apply, how to search for outside scholarships, that's a huge question. And then once you get your financial aid package, kind of what to look at, and then, recommended timelines. And of course, we'll leave plenty of time at the end for questions and answers. So what we're asking is we'll go ahead and do the formal presentation, and then so save your questions to the end, and then we'll leave plenty of time for that. And I just want to remind everybody, we are recording this webinar, so don't worry about scribbling notes. We will send you a copy of the video following this webinar session. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to Tracy.
Great, all righty. So the first thing I wanted to go over was the types of financial aid that you are applying for when you're going through this process. The best type of money that's out there is the free money, and those are the scholarships and grants. That's money that doesn't have to be repaid, so it helps you pay without having to repay anything. So those are the best types of funds. That's what you're trying to maximize as you're going through the application process. The other type of financial aid that's in the news a lot right now is federal student loans. Loans are funds that do have to be repaid at some point after you graduate or cease to be enrolled half-time. Typically, loans are going to be deferred while you're in school, so you don't have to make payments on them while you're in school. Interest may be accruing, but you don't have to make payments on it while you're in school, but it does have to be repaid. And then the other type of financial aid is called federal work-study, and this is a program where a student would be able to work on a campus part-time, and they would be paid with federal work-study dollars, which is a need-based program. So loans and work-study are considered self-help types of funds, but the grants and scholarships are the free money that doesn't have to be repaid. That's the type you're trying to really maximize throughout this process.
Okay. So who's eligible?
Okay. And this is primarily for federal, state, and most institutional aid. That's what this definition is that we're talking about here. To qualify for financial aid, first of all, you have to be admitted into an eligible degree program. And when we talk about a degree program, we're talking generally about if you're going into an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, or a master's degree, a graduate program. So if you have bachelor's, master's, or associates, those are generally all going to be eligible for federal and state and institutional financial aid. If you're thinking about going into some type of certificate or licensure program, then it starts getting a little bit tricky. So you would want to check with the school that you're applying to see if their degree programs are eligible, and if you're applying for something specific that may not have eligibility. So that's the real big one, is you have to be in an eligible degree program. Second, you do have to be a U.S. citizen or an eligible non-citizen, so you have your resident alien card to qualify for most federal and state aid and most institutional aid. And you also have to be enrolled at least half-time, which is defined as 6 credits for an undergraduate student for most federal and state programs. If you're going into a graduate program, this definition of half-time is going to vary from school to school, so you would want to check with the school to see what would qualify as half-time status. Standard would be about 5 credits at most schools, but if you're going for an undergraduate program, associate's or bachelor's degree, you're looking at 6 credits per term. You also need to have a high school diploma or its equivalent, such as a passing GED test score. There's a couple different things that can qualify for that, but that is required for federal aid. And then if you have prior federal aid, like student loans, you can't be in default on a prior federal loan, which means you didn't pay back the loan, so you went into collections on the loan, or an overpayment on a prior federal grant, and that's pretty rare. But basically, if you're in default, you can't get more federal aid until you resolve that default status.
Gotcha. And Tracy, can you clarify 6 credits? That's quarter credits, correct?
6 credits for quarter credits. Again, you want to check with each school to find out what their definition is. Some schools have a different way to measure credits. So if they say 4 credits is full-time, it might be 1 credit per class. Then for that school, it might be 2 credits as half-time. So again, you want to check with the school. But for quarter credits, it's generally 6 credits per term.
How do we apply?
Okay, and I want to clarify, we're talking about two different application processes here. This first part, how to apply for aid, we're referring to federal and state and institutional aid. So that's the first application process. And then we're going to go in later into how to search for outside scholarships. Because when you go through this first process, the schools are going to look for you for federal and state and institutional aid. They're not going to be looking for outside scholarships. So that's where we're going to go over both processes. So for the first process, in terms of maximizing federal and state and institutional aid, the big application is the free application for federal student aid, or the FAFSA form. That's one that all schools are going to require, and that is available to be completed at the website fafsa.ed.gov. So it's an online application, and when you do this application, it's going to ask for things like what's your income, what's your family size, number of people in college, what are your assets. This is the one that asks for all the income information. And kind of scares some people, but it really is easier to do than in the past. This is the one that everybody requires. And what you're going to do, when you fill out the FAFSA form online, it's going to be sent to the federal processor. And they're going to process all your information, and then they're going to send the results of the FAFSA to all of the schools that you list on the FAFSA application. And you can list up to 10 schools on the FAFSA, so you don't have to make up your mind immediately which school you're going to go to. You can have this information sent to multiple schools, get multiple financial aid award offers sent to you, and then you can make a comparison and see which school is going to be most affordable to you based on their cost and their financial aid availability for you. Okay. It's also important on the FAFSA to complete the correct year's application, and the reason I say that is if you're applying for the current academic year, you might be doing the current aid year's application, say for if you were going to start this coming spring term, you might be doing the current year's application. But if you're also wanting aid for next fall, which is the next academic year, you also are going to be completing the next year's FAFSA form. So you fill out the application, one FAFSA per academic year, so you may be filling out two at the same time, depending on when in the year you're applying. So keep in mind that you want to make sure you do the right one. So you want to check with the school to make sure you're doing the right one, especially if you're going to be starting school, say, in the summer. Summer term might be a header for one school's academic year or a trailer for another school's. So you want to check with them and see which academic year's FAFSA you need to do for them. But that's the big one. The FAFSA is the big form that everybody's going to need.
And Tracy, if they wanted to start fall 2016, is the FAFSA form already ready for 2016-17? Or?
Yes. Yes, it's available every January 1st for the next academic year, so you want to be doing it now for the next fall, the 16-17 year, for sure.
Perfect.
Yes. In addition, depending on what schools you're applying to, a lot of public schools, community colleges, and four-year public schools, the FAFSA will be the only form that they require to look for financial aid. A lot of private schools may have a separate application to collect information that they can't get off the FAFSA or from their admissions office to consider you for institutional aid. So you want to check with the schools that you're applying to see if they have any other applications in addition to the FAFSA form to be considered for their financial aid at their school. In addition to the FAFSA and maybe the school's application, about 30% of all FAFSA forms are flagged by the federal processor for a process called verification. And that means the schools have to confirm the information you submitted is accurate. So if you are flagged by the federal processor or by the school for verification, there'll be some separate applications and forms that you may need to submit to the school. And the first one is the verification worksheet. The school will tell you where to get it from their website typically. And then also for the student, we're going to need what's called a tax return transcript from the IRS. This is different from the tax return that you file with the IRS. A transcript is actually a line-by-line summary of what has been processed by the IRS. So it's a little bit different. So we would need a tax return transcript from the student. If the student is married, we would need the spouse's transcript. And if the student has filed the FAFSA as an dependent student with their parents' information, we would also need the parent's tax return transcript to complete that verification process. So those are the minimal forms. Now, the one thing to note for the tax return transcript, and this it gets a little bit technical, if you're filing, for example, if you're filing the FAFSA form right now, in January, February, you probably haven't done your taxes yet, so that's not going to be available. you want to file the FAFSA as early as you can. And you can file the FAFSA with estimated figures. It's better to file early with estimated figures and then correct the data later once you have filed your return. And one of the options that the feds allow us to do once you have filed your tax return to correct those numbers is once your tax return has been processed by the IRS, you can go back into the FAFSA, go back into the financial information that you've estimated. You can connect with the IRS and actually retrieve your processed data from the IRS and load it into the FAFSA form. And then those updated numbers will be sent to all of the schools that you list. So if you do that data retrieval process from the IRS, most schools can then waive that tax return transcript requirement. So it's important to note the timing. You might file early with estimated figures and then correct the data later with actual numbers so the schools can verify. Okay?
So we're going to switch to, so that was federal financial aid.
Yes, yes.
That whole process. And now we're going to talk about another big topic, which is scholarships.
Yes. And again, what I've just talked about is how to get considered for federal and state and institutional grants and scholarships. But then there's also a process where there's lots of scholarships out there that are donated by private organizations. A lot of churches, volunteer organizations, I think the Elks Club, the Lions Club, different employers, things like that. So in addition to doing the whole federal application process, you also want to be searching for what we call outside scholarships. And typically that is done in an online search process. And so you're going to be going online to different scholarship search engines. Now, we are very lucky in the state of Oregon to have an agency called the Oregon Office of Student Access and Completion, or OSAC as we call it. They are a state agency, and they handle over 400 local scholarships, primarily for Oregon residents attending Oregon schools. And what they do is they have a big database of all of these scholarships where you can go to this website, the getcollegefunds.org website, and you can search through their scholarships and narrow it down. And then you would just do one scholarship application to be considered for the different scholarships you think you may qualify for. So that's most of our students have had the best success using that application for the local scholarships. When you're doing a search for outside scholarships, the key thing to keep in mind is a lot of these search engines, you're searching locally and regionally and nationally. And most students have the most success at finding scholarships at the local and regional level simply because there's less competition than with these national scholarships with so many people applying for them. So especially for Oregon students, the Get College Funds is a really great resource. We have a lot of other links to different financial aid and scholarship search engines on our website. A lot of schools do, so if you're looking at our school or any other school, generally you can go to their financial aid page and find these similar links. One, the finaid.org is a general website that's really good for general financial aid information. They have links to scholarship search engines like FastWeb. We also partner with SALT, which is a nonprofit organization. They have a scholarship search engine on there. And what you're going to be doing with these scholarship search engines is you're going to be entering a personal profile. So what degree are you going for? What's your major? What year are you in school? Are you a freshman, sophomore, junior? What's your GPA? Where are you from? Those types of things. And then these search engines are going to search their databases for scholarships that fit your profile. And they're going to provide you with a list of scholarships that they think you may qualify for, either at the local, or regional, or national level. So they'll provide you with that list of scholarships and also contact information for the organizations that are offering those scholarships. And then what you do is you then contact those organizations to apply for those scholarships specifically.
Right. And one of those, I think one of the big misperceptions is scholarships are only available for the sort of traditional freshman student. Do these cover kind of all of those ranges of age groups?
There are scholarships with so many different criteria. I mean, I've seen scholarships for left-handed students, believe it or not. I've seen scholarships for caddies. I've seen them for people who play the Scotch bagpipes. They're all over the place, and there's some for what we could consider non-traditional age students, adults going back to school after being away for some time, for single parents. They're all over the board. A lot of them are for students from a specific school, high school, or zip code, a specific county. There's a lot of different scholarships out there.
Great. All right. So now we get to when they receive their financial aid packages and what should they consider?
Okay. So you've done these processes, you've filled out all the applications, and now you're going to start getting these financial aid packages from the different colleges. And a lot of times the biggest mistake is people look at it and go, oh, this school offered me this amount of scholarship and that's the highest scholarship, so I'm just going to go there. But really, it's going to vary. If the school is more expensive, they might have given you a larger scholarship, but if their costs are higher, it might not be as good of a deal. So don't just look at the total amount of scholarships. You want to look at a couple different factors. The big thing is, what's the total loan debt? And I should back up just a second. When you start getting these financial aid packages, the schools are going to look for the free money first. They're going to look at all the different scholarships and grants and free sources of aid that you will qualify for first. And then they're going to list what loans you will qualify for, and then they may list the work study that you qualify for. Doesn't mean that you have to accept everything in the package. The schools just want you to know what resources are available to you to help pay for your education. So you might get a package that has grants and scholarships and loans, and you don't want the loans, and that's fine. You can just accept the free portion of it if you want to. But if you are going to look at all the different types of resources and compare them, if you are going to take on student loan debt, what you want to look at is what is your total loan debt at the completion of the degree. So this school might be more expensive, so I might be taking on more debt at that school versus a less expensive school. So what's my total debt at the completion of the degree, not just 1 year, but the total degree. And also, even if I have scholarships and grants and loans, you might still have out-of-pocket expenses that you have to pay for. So what is your total out-of-pocket expense at the completion of the degree? So those are two very big things to look at when you're comparing the amounts of aid that you're getting from each school. And then also, if you're getting scholarships from the school or from private organizations, a key thing to look at are what are the renewal criteria to keep the scholarship. So if they give you a scholarship 1 year, what do you have to do to keep it? A good example is if you were going to start out in engineering and they give you this great scholarship, but then you decide mid-year, oh, I'm not an engineering student, this isn't working, I'm going to switch to English. What's going to happen to that scholarship? If you switch majors, is the scholarship going to go away? Same thing if there's a GPA requirement. If the GPA requirement is a 3.75 to keep it, that's a pretty high GPA to keep in college. So you want to make sure if you keep a scholarship, are you going to be able to get it in future years, and how long until you finish the program? So those are some key questions to ask as you're comparing the packages.
Okay. So recommended timelines, obviously January, February, this is kind of
this is critical time. This is the time of year to be applying for financial aid for sure for the next year. So again, you want to, obviously January is over, but you want to file as soon as you can, file the FAFSA as soon as you can. And remember, you can file with estimated figures and correct them later. It's better to file early with estimated figures than to miss some deadlines. So that's the key thing, is file now and fix it later. Then what the schools will do, for example, we talked about the verification process. It could be if you file with estimated figures, the school may give you an estimated financial aid package. And then when you update your numbers or correct your numbers later, the package may change depending on how far off you were on your estimate. But if your estimate was pretty good, then the award letter should be pretty strong. But funds do run out, so you want to make sure that you apply as early as you can to get maximum consideration, especially for the free sources of funds, those scholarships and grants. And also, you have to reapply for aid each year. So if you're filling out the application now for the current 15-16 year, but then you're also wanting aid for next fall, you might be doing 2 years applications at the same time. So you just want to keep that in mind. But you just do it once per academic year, but you redo it every year. So you want to check with the schools for what their priority deadlines are. A big deadline is March 1. Most schools are going to have a recommended deadline of March 1. It doesn't mean that you can't have financial aid if you apply after that date. It just means that in order to have maximum consideration, all types of aid are pretty much going to be available if you apply by that date. And if you apply after that date, you may still get all the financial aid you would have qualified for earlier, but some aid may have run out. So keep that in mind. The other thing is, if you get a package from a school and maybe you don't have scholarships on it, keep contacting them and keep working with them, because sometimes schools will have scholarships that they award out and the students they give them to don't attend, and they can then re-award them to new recipients. So throughout the cycle of the school year, the application process, money may be added to your award at a different date. So it doesn't hurt to ask the school, I've got this package, is there any more aid that might be available at a later date? Another reason to keep in mind that March 1 deadline is that OSAC scholarship application for the Oregon residents, that has a March 1st deadline to be considered for all those different scholarships. So that's a real big one. But again, you can apply after that date. It's just some aid may run out after that.
And I think that's a great point to bring up, because we get this question a lot, especially from prospective students who are looking at, say, fall term, and at this point they're looking at it and it's August,
right.
And they think, oh no, what's going to happen? But right. You know, it's just the point is that some aid may have run out, but there's still right. aid available.
Yes, and some aid is always available. If you qualify for some federal grants and student loans, those are always available. I have students who are applying and the term's already started and they're applying very late, but there's some aid that will always be available. You just have to get your application in. Okay. Yeah.
So we're here to help you. So Tracy, you know, one of the benefits of your office is that regardless if they're going to be a student here or not, you're always a resource for information around financial aid. So we are putting this information out there. You are free to, you know, contact our financial aid office if you have further questions, especially if you are a parent, even with a 17-year-old who's currently applying to college. Yep. They were happy to answer your questions as well. And you are more than welcome to come visit our campus office. We posted our hours there. Just to note, Marylhurst University does have free parking, so you shouldn't worry about that. And as far as our location, in case you're not sure where Marylhurst is located, we are actually in the Portland area. We're about 10 minutes south of Portland, right between Lake Oswego and West Lynn, along the Willamette River on Highway 43. And so there's the email, which Tracy's team will always is answering, and of course the website, financial aid, at marylhurst.edu/financial aid has a lot of valuable information.
Yes, yes.
So I think we are through sort of our formal presentation. So we're going to check and see if there's any further questions. We kind of gave you a really broad overview of financial aid, things to consider. So let's see if there is any further questions. So if you have a question, go ahead and type it in now, and we will answer sort of the public questions that are applicable to the whole group. If you have a very, very specific personal question to you, feel free to type that in, and Tracy's team will follow up with you after this webinar. Okay. So let's see, we're kind of having, so I think we listed some places that are trustworthy for scholarships. So we have that. What if I'm in the state of Washington or other states than Oregon? Do they have similar things like OSAC? Or?
Yes, I know there's one for the state of Washington. It's called Washboard, interesting name, and it's similar to the Oregon agency where you can do a search. That's primarily, again, for Washington residents attending Washington schools, but some scholarships are transportable out of state. So you'd want to check with their agency, whatever the state agency is in your state, to see if there's a search engine or an agency in your state that does have a similar application to the Oregon application. Absolutely.
Perfect. And let's see, so one question around here is financial aid advising. So we did mention your office is always open for that. What would you advise, say I'm a newly admitted student, I just got my financial aid package, should I check in with my Office of Financial Aid? What's a good kind of, to set them up well for the future?
Right. If you have your financial aid package and you have questions, the first thing I would do is contact the financial aid office with your questions specific to the school. Most schools accept questions over the phone, via email. You can stop in or make appointments, depends on the school. So definitely contact them. A lot of schools, their information is online. So I know at our school, for example, if you get an award letter from us, you actually log into their school's portal and you can see what we call our to-do list of items. And so we'll tell you what the next step is. And because sometimes getting the financial aid package is just the first step. And then once to actually get the aid to disperse, there might be additional things that you need to do. And so the school will let you know what you need to do next to get the aid to disperse for you. So definitely if you have questions about what to do next or what does the aid mean, if you're confused about the different types of scholarships or grants or loans, definitely contact them.
Okay, and I know you covered this a little bit in your presentation, but say I have an existing loan, federal loan out there. It's just that I'm in default. Is that correct?
Right. Right. There's two things. If you're in default on a prior federal loan, that has to be resolved before you can get any future financial aid. So you'd want to work with your loan servicer on that to get that resolved. The other thing that some students come up against, especially if they're coming back to school, is they've borrowed loans previously. For both undergraduate and graduate students, there is what we call a cumulative loan limit. And so when you apply for aid, the schools are going to look at how much have you borrowed, what are the annual loan limits that we can give you, and what's the cumulative limit. And if you're getting close to that cumulative limit for a degree program, we would let you know. Those are the only things that would prevent you from getting any future loans.
And it's just defaulted on a student loan. What if I'm defaulted on a car loan?
It's just student loans that we care about. We don't care about private loans.
Just want to make sure. Okay, well, I am not seeing any further questions, so we are going to go ahead and sort of close out this webinar. So first and foremost, we want to say thank you for everybody attending, and we hope that you find this information valuable. Again, if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. And this webinar was recorded, therefore you will receive this video recording about 24 hours after this session. So again, thank you everyone. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
All right, and we either hope to see you as future students or if we can help you answer any questions along the way.